Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching Viewpoint with me, Frank RAUSAN PEREIRA. Well, on the 1st of July 2017, India marked a historic shift in its indirect tax landscape with the launch of the Goods and Services Tax. In time with its perceived importance, it was freedom of another kind at midnight, appropriately celebrated in the Central Hall of Parliament from an archaic tax system that duplicated and cascaded taxation between centre and states, adding enormous costs to compliance. GST reaches a significant 8-year milestone on July 1st. Over this period, it has matured significantly into a comprehensive indirect tax system backed by a digital structure and a cooperative federal framework. In this edition of Viewpoint, we will analyze GST at 8, the good, not so good, and what next. Joining me on the program today are Vivek Ranjan, Member, Tax Policy, CBIC, and DP Nagendra Kumar, Senior Advisor, Deloitte, India. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this edition of Viewpoint. Mr. Vivek Ranjan, let me start the program with you first. Before we look at 8 years of GST, let's also look at, the steps leading up to GST itself, what it went through, what it took to get the all-important GST through.
Thank you for having me on this momentous occasion of GST at 8. The problem of indirect tax reform is actually intertwined. That is of GST along with VAT, both at central level and state level. So the process, and let us understand the problem first. Since we are a federal system, we have a federal system, both center has the power to tax on goods, and similarly states have had prior to GST introduction. They could also levy cesses, they could also levy surcharges on commodities. So what had happened was, according to some calculation, a business which was operating in pan-India in all the states and UTs had to deal with some 500 taxes if you count each sales tax levied by a state, each state as separately. So 500 taxes. In many of these, he has had to comply with requirements of registration, requirements of return filing, and so on. So it was really a very onerous system, and therefore a tax reform was overdue. As I said earlier, the story of GST and VAT has to be understood and explained in one go, because they are linked. So let us start with the very first reform process. That will take us back to 1st of March 1986, when Mod VAT was introduced by the central government on a limited number of commodities. So that was the beginning. Thereafter, as far as central government is concerned, I will just mention the few milestones. 94-95, services were brought under service tax net, and that was also one of the complaints of experts, that services which was contributing more than 50% of the GDP was not being adequate taxed. So that was addressed, but it was on a modest scale. In 94-95 budget, we attempted to cover 3. That list gradually every year it went up. By 2002-3, we had extended Mod VAT to practically all commodities. So that, as far as center is concerned, that process was complete. In 2004-5, credit utilization was allowed across goods and services. So in a sense, we eventually reached the milestone as far as that implementation or simplification of indirect taxation is concerned. As far as VAT is concerned, the journey starts in the year 1995, when the then Prime Minister, in a meeting with Chief Ministers, had broached the issue of introduction of VAT state level because of cascading problems and all other problems. For 4 years, there were meetings that were happening. On November 16th, 1999 is a key date when the then Finance Minister, again in a meeting with CM, 2 important decisions were taken. The first was that states must not engage in what was called sales tax rate war. The states were undercutting each other in order to attract businesses in their states. So that was decision number 1. Second important decision was that harmonization of sales tax rate commodity wise by adoption of a uniform floor rate. So states could impose more than that, but there had to be a minimum floor rate. So these two decisions were taken in the year 1909 November. A standing committee of state finance ministers was also formed. In a year's time, this was converted into an empowered committee of state finance minister. That happened on 17th of July 2000. And you would be surprised to note that within 1.5 years of its functioning, EC could achieve 98% of harmonization of sales tax rate by way of a floor rate. Then states started implementing VAT gradually over a period of time. So first date was 1st of April 2005 when a limited number of states introduced VAT. 2006-07 budget, a pronouncement was made. For that matter, GST was first mentioned in the budget documents, saying that it will be introduced from 1st of April 2010. So this is as far as GST introduction is concerned. Then there was gap, and in November 2009, 2-3 years gap, EC, that is empowered committee, circulated what is called first discussion paper on GST. So that is November 2009. Then again there was a gap. Finally, September 2016, the Constitution 101st Amendment Act was passed, and that eventually led to introduction of GST in the country.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Vivek, Ranjan, for taking us through the brief history really and putting it so well into perspective for us as far as how the GST came into being. Let's look ahead now and look at 8 years of GST. Let me bring in, Mr. Kumar into the picture as well. As far as GST at 8 is concerned, Deloitte has come out with an extensive survey as well, with regards to what has happened over the last years with regards to GST and what's working really. What are the findings of the survey?
Yeah. Thank you for having me in today's program. The 8 years of the GST journey has been indeed transformational. Starting from 2017, I think now we have 8 years of journey to look back and see what worked for in terms of this transformational tax reform becoming successful. It's the GST at 8 survey brought out by Deloitte had interviewed around about 963 taxpayers, cutting across 8 industry segments, which includes very large corporations, the MSME sector, and the domestic large companies. From the year 2022, when the satisfaction level was at about 59%, now in the year 2025, that satisfaction level has gone to about 85%. Now, this clearly shows, I think, the consistent efforts taken by the government in terms of automating the tax processes, I think, which has received the highest percentage of positive response from the taxpayers, coupled with the proactive and dynamic decision making by the GST Council. The survey has clearly brought out that government is not only responsive, but is also acting on some of those key issues on which the industry has been fraught with the difficulties. Now, the GST 8 survey is the 4th such consecutive survey brought out by the Deloitte. It coincides with the rollout of the GST on 1st July every year. This is the 4th edition. I think consistently the taxpayers have given a thumbs up for this transformational tax reform. In coming to the other aspects of the findings of the GST at 8 survey, apart from giving the positive sentiment at 85%, I think the taxpayers have also given a big thumbs up for the proactive tax policy making by the government. As Mr. Vivek Ranjan put it across, I think GST is actually an endeavor of the center and the states in the true cooperative federalism. And these decisions are taken in a very, very collaborative and a consensus-based manner. I think the industry has given a big thumbs up for the proactive approach of the GST Council in taking decisions, which not only has clarified many ambiguities in the GST law, but also provided, I think, clarifications in terms of issues that could have resulted into huge potential legal disputes that could have taken years to resolve. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful to know that, there's a big thumbs up as far as the taxpayers are concerned. 85% of them think that the GST is well on track and is headed in the right direction. Mr. Ranjan, coming back to you now. 8 years of GST, what is it that really stands out? What is it that has really worked? And what are some of the challenges?
So the raison d'etre of any tax system is collection of revenue. So let me start with collection of revenue. Average monthly collection, GST collection in the first year, that is 2017-18, was a shade below 90,000 crore. That figure has increased to 1,84,000 crore in the year 24-25, that last completed year. So there is an increase of 105% over the initial year, which is very significant and important. What has happened is that as part of GST deliberation, there was a 5-year revenue guarantee which was offered, assurance which was offered to states. So that 5-year lapsed on 1st of July 2022. But the states are still comfortable. So GST has been major taxation reform which has not let the states down. It is center is also happy with the collections. In the current year, there are only 2 months. The collection has exceeded 2,18,000 or nearly 19,000. But typically March and April are good revenue paying months. Revenue has a cyclicality or seasonality to it. And therefore, these trends may not continue in future months. But the fact is that there is a excellent growth of 11.6% in the year 23-24 over previous year and 9.4% last year. So these are healthy trends for us going forward. So that's part one. Taxpayer base, let me just talk about it. When GST was introduced, number of taxpayer migrated was about 65 lakh. We have a tax base as on end May of 1.52 crore. So there has been a significant increase in number of taxpayer. The revenue realization which you have seen has been very impressive is also because of the fact that there has been increased formalization of economy, which is obviously been possible because of a number of steps taken by the government, on the direct taxes side, UPI and so on. So let us hope that the trend continues in future.
Absolutely, the trend should continue. Several thresholds have been breached, and we hope that newer thresholds will be breached in the months and years to come as well. Mr. Kumar, coming back to you now, let's also try and understand, the evolution of the GST, so to speak, from 2017 to 2025. There were initial teething troubles or teething problems. Those were on expected lines because such kind of a reform we knew would bring about some kind of challenges as well. How would you look back at the evolution of the GST?
Indeed, I believe the GST journey has been one of those roller coaster ride. In the first 3 years of implementation of GST, we had the challenges in adopting the new tax laws and adoption by the large number of taxpayers with diverse background. The initial period was witnessed with tremendous challenges with regard to getting the IT system in place. It took some time for us to stabilize, but I think then came the biggest challenge in the form of COVID. The COVID actually destabilized the entire process and led to significant fall in revenue, causing disruptions and a question mark whether a tax like GST is at all, I think, sustainable given the challenges of the economic downfall. But post 2022, I think the V-shaped resurgence which happened in the economy, thanks to the economic activity and the correct policy which the government took, I think the GST started stabilizing. I think particularly I recollect, I think the GST Council, I think from 45th GST Council onwards up to 55 GST Council, this 10-11 GST Council meetings, if we can look at the number of issues which has been proactively addressed by the GST Council deliberations is something which I think the industry has been really, really appreciative of. The deliberations happened during the stabilization period, not only led to revenue buoyancy, but also I think make the entire process compliance much easier. In fact, one of the key parameters on which the GST at Deloitte survey has worked out is on the ease of doing business. On ease of doing business, I think the taxpayers have consistently rated that the compliance process due to automation and also significant amount of, I think, streamlining of the process and procedures has made the tax compliance easy to comply with. I think if you look at the overall 8 years journey, the first 3 years has been a challenge in adoption to your new tax reforms, and particularly in the IT area. And COVID-related challenges led to tremendous amount of disruption. But post-COVID, I think the GST has led into phase of stabilization. And today we are looking at, I think, over the last 8 years, the key objectives of introducing GST, like revenue optimization for governments, I think ease of compliance for the businesses, and competitive pricing for the goods and services for the consumers. I think a fair amount of success has been achieved on all the three fronts thanks to this GST reform introduced by the government. Yeah.
Okay, very well. Let's take the discussion forward now. Mr. Ranjan, let's look ahead. Definitely over the last 8 years, things have worked out and worked out for the better. As the world changes, as nature of business changes as well, what can we expect going into the future?
So let us start with most important thing on the table as of now. So there are 3 GOMs, that is government group of ministers that has been formed by the GST Council. The first GOM is looking at rate rationalization, which is called GOM on RR. The next is GOM on compensation cess. As you would be knowing, compensation cess is has been validated, is going to lapse on 31st of March 2026. That's coming March. And therefore, what will happen of the compensation cess is another issue that is before the GST Council, which has been referred to a specific GOM. There is a third GOM which is dealing with medical and life insurance. Again, there has been demand in various sectors about rationalization of tax structure in this sector. So that's one. As far as government is concerned, government is also looking at ways to expand the tax base. That would be necessary to undertake any kind of serious tax reform. So that's another area that government is seriously looking at. There was a recently a Chief Commissioner's conclave held in New Delhi, and during that there was a brainstorming which was done on how to enhance the taxpayer base, and the field formations have been asked to undertake publicity campaign, outreach exercise with the trade and association bodies so as to increase the tax base. Another area of concern has been how to reduce grievances of the taxpayers. And again, during the conclave, it was CCs have been told, Chief Commissioners they have been told that proactively handle grievances of taxpayers. There are many forums through which grievances are received. One is of course CPGram, which is a central portal. So those, we have a fantastic performance. We have been in the first top 5 in last many periods, and so we are doing well, but it is quality of response and resolution of disputes which matters, and CCs have been told firmly that please look at that carefully and personally. So that's another. Evasion is another serious issue. There have been lots of cases booked on fake invoicing, and that is a serious matter of concern. Basically, the philosophy that we are following is we are trying to balance facilitation with strictness as far as evasion is concerned. And so typically we have 3 modes of intervention, that is scrutiny, audit and enforcement. But as I said, we are trying to balance facilitation with enforcement, and therefore we are, as far as central government is concerned, we are not breaching 1% mark. So ratio last year was a little less than 1%. So that is another area that we are seriously trying to address now.
Absolutely. All these areas need to be addressed, of course, if we have to ensure that we have a far more better GST, of course, going into the future. Talking about looking ahead, Mr. Kumar, let's also look at another aspect of technology, being used as far as GST is concerned, the evolution of technology as well. Let's not forget, we are in the era of AI. AI seems to have infiltrated every part of our lives. So going forward and looking ahead, what is the role of technology? How do you see all of this playing out?
In fact, the goods and service tax is completely administered electronically, end-to-end process, right from obtaining registration to payment of taxes or filing returns, claiming refunds, or even filing an appeal. The entire process is automated. I think the government has done extremely well in seeing that these technology adoption by the taxpayers has been made easier by providing adequate time for them to tweak their systems and also come on board in doing this. We have seen this in terms of at the time of inception of GST in making the electronic filing and electronic payment of taxes. I think when the government introduced the e-way bill in 2018 and the e-invoice somewhere in 2019, I think the taxpayers have adopted it without much challenges and difficulties. Over a period of time, I think the effort on the part of the government is to see that the disclosures made in various returns and declarations made are made available to the taxpayer in terms of the pre-populated data, whether it is in the input tax credit area or for that matter on the liability side. The latest reform which the government has started in October 2024 by introducing the invoice management system, I think is going to do a lot of benefit in terms of not only streamlining the compliance, but also I think plugging the revenue leakages which happened on account of the misuse of the ITC provisions. The government is looking at, I think, based on the supplier side disclosures, the recipient side input tax credit ledger gets automatically populated, and also the liability register gets firmed up so that before the due date of filing the liability return, the tax liabilities are computed, calculated, disclosed to the taxpayers, validated, and ultimately the filing process becomes some sort of an activity which should lead to no disputes. I think on automation front, the government has done a very, very commendable job. Going forward, I think we need to look at how do we automate the B2C transactions. The business to consumer transactions is ultimately the revenue for the government. I think the government, in the GST Council meeting, there is an in-principle decision taken recently that the paperless invoices could be introduced. The schema, the modalities, etc., I think currently under discussion at the GSTN level. The industry has given a big thumbs up for the automation and look forward to continue to ensure that the automated processes not only bring down the compliance cost, but also makes the entire GST compliance easy to do. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Points very well taken. It's time now to get closing comments from both the panelists with the best way forward and what next and where do we go from here. Starting first with you, Mr. Vivek Ranjan.
So let us first thank Mr. Nagendra Kumar and Deloitte India for undertaking this survey for last 4 years. And it is actually telling us that we are on the right track. So as we look ahead, obviously tax reform is an ongoing process. It is not a single shot thing. And as Mr. Kumar has mentioned, last 15, 20 GST Council meetings has focused on reducing areas of disputes and issuing clarifications proactively, rationalizing rates so as to reduce disputes. So that has been the focus of last few GST Council, and it is likely to continue in future. As I said, there are 3 GOMs, and one of them is looking at rate rationalization, so that will also address some of these concerns. Procedural simplification again has been seizing the attention of the GST Council, and we have issued lots of them. I will just give you a few specific pointers in this regard. Section 128A has been introduced in the Act recently, and that basically says that in cases of non-suppression SCNs, if you pay your taxes, then there will be complete waiver from penalty and interest. So that's a big step, and as far as our information goes, about 2.9 lakh applications have been filed under this scheme. They are subject to approval. Another major area was where we have done lots of pro-trade activity is in the area of introducing amnesty scheme for late filing of returns, and the penalties have been, fees have been waived. At least there are 12 such notifications that have been issued over last few years. So we are seized of all these matters. Trade facilitation remains on the top of government's agenda, and we'll continue to take forward that process.
Absolutely. Wonderful to hear that as well. And Mr. Kumar, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Yeah, I think the GST at 8 survey clearly says in the GST 2.0, one of the major expectations from the industry is setting up a robust dispute resolution machinery. I think the tax tribunal is in the final stages of its constitution, and the industry is eagerly looking forward so that I think the long pending issues which requires to be resolved, the tribunal could address them soon. The second important thing the industry is looking at is on the export rule liberalization. While government has been very proactive in ensuring that the GST has not only led to competitive pricing of the goods and services domestically, but also internationally, there are few distortions which has crept into in interpreting the legal provisions, consequent to which I think some of the exports are getting taxed. I think the government had made efforts in the past to issue clarifications and circular. There are still some gray areas. I think I understand that the government is working on that. The export liberalization not only will make Indian exports competitive, but also makes, I think, the domestic production activities given the required impetus. The third important expectation from the industry is now that the GST revenues are stabilizing, some of the issues which were flagged on account of the revenue considerations at the time of introduction of GST, like putting restrictions on input tax credit and also providing some sort of a staggered release of refunds. I think perhaps the government could look at all these things, considering, of course, at the same point, the revenue considerations, and are also looking at exactly where the businesses will look at tax compliance becomes much easier. It's all at overall, if you look at the 8 years journey, I think the industry has been more than happy in not only expressing their positive sentiments, but also very hopeful, as Mr. Ranjan said, the proactive decision making and the type of, I think, the engagement which government has with stakeholders leaves no room for doubt that there will be always, I think, a solution-oriented approach in meeting those challenges. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, we'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that a monumental reform like the GST has worked wonderfully well and is continuing to do well ever since its inception in 2017. Of course, there are three group of ministers that have been formed by the GST Council to look into various challenges that may come about and that have been plaguing the regime, and trying to fix all those issues and fix all those problems and ensure that we have a better GST regime going into the future. Enhancing the tax payer base is something that needs to be worked on and is on top of the agenda really, and reducing grievances as a whole and proactively handling them to ensure that the taxpayers' lives are made easier. With that, it's a wrap in this edition of Viewpoint. See you again next time.